So we start. We have on stage now Pedro Wirz and Professor Heike Bischoff-Ferrari. And the talk will be moderated by Mareike Dittmer. Mareike Dittmer is the director of the Art Stations Foundation Museum Suisse. She also tells me that she's living in Suisse now, in the Engadin. And she will also teach at the ZHDK from this fall. So we will have maybe a chance to see her even more in Zurich. And I will not lose any more time and hand over directly to you, Mareike, now for your talk.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. We start, as all the other talks will have this kind of like principle. I give you a short introduction of the two artists and scientists we're going to speak with today, and then you're going to have the chance to have a little presentation of your specific subject. So Pedro Wirz is an artist I have actually met 2 years ago, I think, for the first time in Berlin when he was on a residency, when I was still living in Berlin. And then since then our paths have crossed again and again. And I find it very interesting to see how your work develops and what Chus Martinez called its chance in motion. And then when the idea came up to have this conversation with the scientists, I thought your work naturally lends it to it, because you work a lot with nature, you work with this circle of fertilities, you work with these ideas about how material ages, and then Heike Bischoff-Ferrari came into the game, who is an eminent Harvard fellow and who is a professor for geriatric and age research here. And actually you're running, what I read, it's the biggest multi-center age study, which I would be very curious to learn a little bit more what this is. So I think we just go into medias res, and you can start with your presentation, please.
Thank you very much. So Pedro and I had a phone call before we went on stage together, and he told me about his interesting life. And I thought I have to at least show that I was, maybe we click on, a little international as well. Next one. So you see a little bit my way till Zurich. I was hopping around between Germany, Switzerland, and America quite a bit. And on the way, I trained in medicine in different fields, including geriatrics, orthopedic surgery, rheumatology, and general medicine. And I became interested in doing research in Basel as an assistant physician. I realized that, by being a physician, I can be helpful to the patient that I see myself. And if I do research, I can reach more patients. And at the same time, I quickly realized I lacked the skills really to do research. And I was very lucky. After a course for young rheumatologists, I was able to get into Harvard School of Public Health, and then even got a chance to get a stipend to stay in Boston for 5 years. This was an extremely fruitful time for me, because I also met my husband in Boston, and I gave birth to my son. So this was really an important part of my life. And after Boston, and it was then 2005, I returned to Switzerland, and I got the chance to practice medicine at the University Hospital of Zurich, that at the time was considering to give aging medicine a platform, because at the time there was no university focus on geriatric medicine and medical research on aging. And I was sort of got the chance to pioneer this field. And I would like you now to see a little bit into what we are doing. So what you will hear is much less complex and abstract than the solar system. And you will relate to it, because all of us, we are in one boat. We all are aging. This is part of our biology. So next slide. So I always show this slide, and you can click it through. You can imagine that this is an 80-year-old person. And you see that you can look very differently and function very differently when you are 80 years old. So what we call that is also the spectrum on aging. We really all age differently, and we can influence that with different concepts. The next slide. And we also know today that we can get very old already now and be very active. So, for example, the New York Times had this nice picture series on older adults. And this is a New York hairdresser who is still actively cutting hair every day at age 107. So this is really impressive. Next slide. And this is always a slide that I show at the medical school, and it relates very much to you when I look around the room. Aging starts early, and we know today that age is not a number. So what you see here is a group of 28-year-old young adults, and they were completely assessed for biomarkers, how they work. And at the time, it is a birth cohort study, when they were 28, they were still very similar. They all were 28, the scientists decided. And then they re-invited them 10 years later, and then you see above there with the blue bars, some of them 10 years later were still 28, and others were already 50. And this is what we call the difference between chronologic age, which is the number, and the biologic age. And we feel that there is a lot of potential that we can help more people to have a younger biologic age, which is the concept of delaying the aging process. And when we are able to do that, and this is really important for medicine, we can also reduce the risk of chronic diseases, which is part of aging, such as cancer, heart disease, and dementia. Next slide. So the good news is, and this is where Pedro and I also connect, his partner was part of a very famous study called the Digital Aging Study, funded by the Duttweiler Institute, which found this important message. We are already younger today as we get older, so you will understand in a moment. Next slide. So in this study, the scientists looked at 1,000 people living in Switzerland in different ages, and they asked them questions about aging and how they feel. And interestingly, even today, young adults have a completely too conservative picture of how you feel when you're older. And the people who were already aged 70 to 80, which by the way is young today, they felt very differently. And the next slide. And when the scientists asked them how old they really feel at age 70 to 80, the men, felt 18 years younger. The women were a little bit more conservative and said 12 years younger. But you see a little bit, this is part of being healthy, but already aging differently today. Next slide. So our research focus is on helping that process. We would like to achieve that all of you can stay healthy and active longer as you age. And just to tell you a number, how impactful this is, so there is epidemiologic, so the large cohort data could calculate that if we achieve that we can delay aging by 7 years, sort of delaying or keeping people active and healthy longer, we would cut in half all the risks of age-related chronic diseases, such as heart disease, cancer, and dementia. And actually, Europe set a goal that in the next 20 years, we want to delay aging by 2 years. This would have an enormous health economic benefit, and it would be the best way to save money in the healthcare system by keeping people healthy longer. Next slide. So how can this be achieved? next slide, is by doing a big study. And really, and this is also the exciting part of doing aging medicine and aging research, you don't only look at the heart or the brain or the muscle or the bone, you always get to, and you have to, look at the whole person. Because it doesn't help you if you have a healthy brain, if everything else falls apart. So it's all about keeping the whole human functioning. And this is really the end point of modern research on aging. So we were able to get a lot of money from the European Commission, in total 19 million Swiss francs, to do a big study in Europe. We included 5 countries, and you see a little bit the line through Europe. Our north was Berlin, and our south was Coimbra. And we included healthy adults aged 70 and older, and we followed them with comprehensive yearly whole-day clinical visits. We were in contact with them every 3 months to know everything what happened to them in their life and related to health. And this is the comprehensive, this is sort of picturing the whole human being. So these Do Health participants are the best described adults aged 70 and older, and they will help us to find out a risk profile, an individual risk profile, next slide, to basically check a person individually. What are the risk factors regarding to genetics, to lifestyle, to current diseases, but also to their mindset? That's also important when you age. And find out what is this person's risk to age acceleratedly, so quicker than others, and what we could do to help that person to delay aging and thereby stay healthy and active longer. And the benefit of that would be that we save money in the healthcare system. This is important today. It's a growing concern of the society, and at the same time help people to enjoy their life as an active and healthy person longer. And what Do Health also did, and we will show the results in the summer this year, it tested 3 simple strategies that everybody could apply in a very inexpensive way. This is vitamin D, omega-3, and exercise. And we will present those results soon. All I can tell you now, we have very exciting findings on many organ functions, and we believe that Do Health will be a pillar in prevention in the future. But what Do Health also shows us are the trajectories of aging. And I'm just showing you this first glance on Do Health data, because what you see is that even within the 3 years of Do Health, there was this movement, so there is fluidity to how we age. And the message really is you can make a change and it's never too late. Thank you very much. I can't compete with Pedro, I say it right here.
Right. Okay, so thank you everybody for being here. Thank you for the invitation. And I want to especially thank Leonie for helping me to organize my confused way of expressing through words. And I have to read this, okay? So, hi, my name is Pedro Wirz. I am a Swiss-Brazilian artist based in Zurich at the moment, and I work on the field of sculpture and installation. I was born in São Paulo, in Brazil. I am a son of a Lebanese and Swiss descendants, and I grew up in a small town in the countryside. So I grew up in the dense contact to the natural world. Slide. So this is me and my father and my brother in one of our labor, like lab that my father would also build with plants and different species of plants. So plants, domestic animals, and wild animals were from the very beginning, along to my parents, my companions and teachers. So from a very early age, my father forced us to understand that should not exist hierarchical structures among the contracts of coexistence between humans and non-humans, plants, spiders, rats. I grew old truly believing that there was not a difference if one would injure or insult a spider, a plant, or one of my brothers. There was like everybody was kind of the same. So my mom, please the next. My mom is a biologist and my father is an agronomist, and my mom worked as a researcher on the life and society structure of African bees, and later she did research on how polluted water would affect molecular structures from tadpoles, kwalkwappen, von Frosche, yeah? So the Hanacates beyana, which is like the common bullfrogs, French people love to eat, that we know. So Hanacates beyana was also the subject matter of my father's daily job, who researched on that same animal for very many years. Please, next slide. And along to that research on frogs, my father also had a small farm to produce something called worm humus. So worm humus is fertilizer for the soil, which is actually based on compost and caca von worms. Okay? And I think, which is also like, there is an interesting example here. I had once a relationship to a person, and I would call her Worm. And she was like, don't call me Worm. It was like, why not? Worm is a beautiful thing, has two hearts. If you cut in the middle, it regenerates. And it also like makes the soil works for us. It's a beautiful thing. So next slide, please. So all that happened during my childhood and teenage ages in a small city between São Paulo and Rio de Janeiro. So that city is called Pindamonhangaba, and Pindamonhangaba is a city in a valley called the Paraíba Valley on southeast of Brazil, very close to the coast, as you can see here. And this specific valley has a very important and very specific, abundant and rich flora and fauna. This is an image from very close where I grew up, so you can have a vibe. It's also the biggest Hare Krishna community in South America. So, okay, for a reason I don't have time now to explain you, I ended up, my first education before doing art was in communication. I learned, I was a public relations, and I also worked on the field for some years. Slide. And the last station of my career as a public relations agent was being the chief of Department of Public Relations from a very big operation on land filling in Brazil. So land filling is a mulhalde. So we humans, we make big holes, and then we put plastic on the top of the soil, and then we put our daily trash inside of this. And we create categories to say, like, this is dangerous, let's bury it very far away. This is okay, let's put just here. And the other thing, we burn, like here in Switzerland. It's a very good way of doing it. So another slide. Just so this was the common landscape I was confronted to going to work every day for some years of my life. And I was always like thinking about what would happen with the soil, what would happen with the water beneath this soil, and what would happen with this debris, etc., 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 in terms of aging from materials here. So now we come to the point of my artist practice. My artist practice and research as artists pretend to dissolve barriers between the natural to the cultural world, and mostly actually vice versa, beziehungsweise from the cultural art, us, intelligent people, to the natural world, the world that we consider irrational. I believe man, animal, plant, and machine are all product of a very same living organism, our planet. the earth. And since we are all siblings, brothers and sisters of the same mother, they should coexist in the best balance possible. So this is an example of my work. Now I'm gonna quickly do an improvisation, which is an object, as you can see, is an egg, which is a symbol of life and beginning, but it's made of a mix of cultural material, clothing. I mean, you can see the textile. This is like gewebt within material, and then you have some roots and earth packing it. Okay, so the next one, please. It's the same series. The next one, please. So I believe on the power of biodiversity and the peaceful and respectful communication between them, and I wish with and through the work to create paths and impressions and metaphors for the audience, mostly living rational organisms, to think about how we can steer evolution, what I believe in a certain point is nothing else than aging. So next, please. So this is another work of mine. Is a sculpture, which is a ball of soil, completely dry out. It's 3 meters diameter ball. And in this show, the text about the show was like, I forgot the word, a bad digestion, but of the planet, like how much stuff are we producing? And the metaphor here was like, you cannot take this ball out of the room, kind of thing. So the next one, please. Here is an image of a show I recently have done, which the sculptures were, they are frogs, as you can see. And these are like sculptures made out of beeswax, which is actually a pure natural material, mixed with, again, clothing. I mean, pure cultural material, fashion, right? Debris of. Next one, please. So you have a close image of one of those objects. The next one, please. This is a view of an exhibition I'm having right now in Kunsthaus Langenthal. I covered the whole floor of the museum with soil, and then there was this carpet would go through the whole exhibition as a certain way of telling the people where they should walk through if they would decide to go in the wild path or the cultural path kind of thing. Next one, please. Just a close review of one of the works. I have a tendency to mix a lot of materials, and I never question myself too much if this is gonna last too long or not. Next one. Another view of the same exhibition, and please the next. So this is one of my favorite works at the moment, which is like it's a sculpture of a symbiosis between like a rational way of constructing a house together with a non-rational way of construction, a nest, like a mice end nest kind of thing. And they are living together here in this piece. Next one. So this one is called Abflussblume. I don't know how to say this in English. Actually, sink gutter flowers. I mean, it's open to you to put whatever you want on it. And the last one is just a wall relief. I did call it Leihmutter, or surrogate mother. And it in first impression looks like a little bit like a disaster, oil disaster kind of thing. I don't think you can see it very well here, I'm sorry. But it's actually a whole composition made of, again, beeswax. So it's always this contradiction, like what is exactly this material? Is it a polluted material, or is it a pure material? I hope I could express myself well to you, and thank you very much. Yeah.
One of the first things that I come to wonder, and after listening to your presentation and looking again at your work, is that with your work there's a very obvious influence, or also going back and forth, as you said, between nature and culture. What is the created influences and what is the material given. Is this something in your scientific work, like the cultural influence on the aging process, that you consider or that you try to implement in your research?
Well, we try a little bit to improve nature by culture, because if you think about nature, it's all about being young, reproductive, survival of the fittest, and culture, I think, can bring a different view to this. That aging is contributing something of value. Experience, for example, we talked in our phone call about being wise when you're older. You're just much more experienced, and also realizing that you can do things in your lifestyle to have an impact on your aging process.
Right, it's interesting because aging is exactly like a common point, because it's biology, so it's nature pure. You can do very little or you can do a lot, but it's also cultural, very like little. Believing how old I am. Right, so that is like really like a balance in between, like that you have to find, like, am I getting too old physically, but I'm still awake in my mind, or I still wear sneakers, cool sneakers?
Of course.
Kind of thing, right?
Did your concept of age change over the, like, I know you've become a father, has that changed your perspective on age?
I have a problem of concentration. And this also gives me a problem on concentrating on life itself. So I'm just go rolling, and then actually I have this friend who told me, like, I'm 32, man, I want to have a family. I was like, oh, 32, I want to have a family. What are you talking? Like, there is some sort of structures. There are they're both cultural and biological. Like, I'm a woman. I want to have babies. I have to have babies. I have a profession. I don't want to have. So all this, and actually having, or I don't have any baby. I'm a father, but then there was like a biological fact in life that made me start to think about and reflecting, like, how do we age, and like, and as said, my mother is a biologist, so it was all the time like, oh, don't eat this because this is gonna give you bad bellyache, or if you want to eat this, be sure you're gonna bite it very well, or eat it. We talk about this, yeah. So I'm learning, I guess, like how to.
Which is part of aging.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's amazing thing. In the beginning, you're like super afraid of aging when you're young, I guess. And then once you understand, we also had this conversation that I'm going to be old. So then you just can enjoy and embrace it, I guess. I don't know, how was with your patients? Are they happy of getting old? Or?
Well, I think it's really interesting. We all know that our physiology is limited. So there is a limit to how old we can get. And I don't know how old we really want to get. So our research is all about pushing the healthy part of life into older age. And when I think about myself, I think the big border is 50. You are much younger than that. But I think up to 50, and you said it a little bit yourself, you may be sort of afraid of aging, but it's very abstract. Yeah. And often really people do not think that life ends. But there is also a gift to sort of going over that border. So whenever we also see it, it's fact in medicine that when you hit aging, it's much more difficult to keep up your muscle mass and muscle strength. You really have to start thinking about eating a healthy diet. You should think about having a checkup, be concerned about your health. But it also starts a very exciting time in life, because you think about that there is an end at one point, and that you are purposefully here every day, and you think, and this is a little bit what I see in my patients. So my patients are usually 80 years and older, but I have many that are 90 or close to 100 years old, and a lot of them are still fully in life. And I have some of them who tell me look, this may be a 95-year-old body, but in there is a wild 21-year-old. And I said, I love it. This is great. And the key thing is I'm always telling my patient, you are 80 now. Please do what you want. Don't care about, about who's looking at you. Just enjoy life. And and regarding you being a father, when I was on the phone with you, he is so excited about being a father, and that's. But what you told me, and I remember that very well myself. My 14-year-old is sitting there. When I became a mother, and I think that's also the reason why you become a parent. It's making you young again.
And also make you a scientist a little bit.
Yeah.
Because then you're like, wait a minute. How yesterday was not like this. So what is happening here? What does the change is like makes you more. I'm sorry, I'm not making propaganda on that subject matter. I'm just using it as a metaphor to talk about aging and life and creation, which is my subject matter. Like how do you deal with these things and what you learn about it? And actually, a point of aging is getting wise. We talk about this as well. Like you get older, and then once you say like, "Whoa, I know so much now," and then you die. Like then when you're ready, it's so nice.
That also, I think there might again be also differences. Like for instance, with humanities, where you say that like an historian will kind of like need to accumulate a certain amount of knowledge, and over the years that makes the books and their analysis of history richer, while as a mathematician, once you turn 30, it's done, basically, because simply as a part of your aging, the ability of your brain to process a certain abstract form of thinking is getting lower.
Is it like this?
You can still be a mathematician and you can solve certain problems, but the kind of like invention, if you haven't made them by 30, I think...
But you do know that the amount of chocolate consumption has been related to the prevalence of Nobel Prize winners.
I don't know this, but this is very interesting. It's a good excuse.
And also, I don't know how it is with math, but there is indication in science that building all this experience, and the other part is the network. You can be a very productive scientist even at older age. It maybe you slow down in some processes in your brain, but you compensate by experience and by being able to connect also to have more resources. In science we never work alone, and I don't know how it is in art.
I've been a much more studio practice person, yeah.
But the moment you go out, you never work alone. You do your studio practice, but when you do exhibitions, when you do...
of course. I was thinking about this fact of artworks and theories from scientists, like how they get unfortunately obsolete, both of them, exactly the very moment they go out of... Like, I discovered this, and the audience go, what is coming next? Or like you do a piece and they're like, whoa, and then people are like, what is the next show? Amazing. What is it? So like how does the products of both activities, they are always like trying to get further. They motivate people to like, and then I was thinking about how these two activities were born, and I just thought... Excuse me. I just thought to myself that they probably born in the very same moment, like this person came out of the cave and then they see something they never saw before, and then one says, "Whoa, what is this? Let me get it. Let me go out and get a close look at it." And the other say, "Whoa, it's beautiful. I'm gonna stay inside and make a drawing of it." So this is probably like how actually has to do a lot of personality as well. Like I don't know.
Do you feel that they're that opposite?
Do I feel what?
That they're that opposite still, that it's the same moment they're born, but that they're opposites in kind of like how to deal with the given world?
No, but I think that's what I actually wanted to say before. They are both trying to explain some sort of truth or like put out one through one certain way of methodology, and one is objective and the other is subjective, I guess. But both are like dealing with the fact that they want to put out truth.
That would be also an interesting question for the scientist. How much subjectivity can you bring in this research, or is it all about being objective and figuring out the rules that are...
The objective part are the methods that you apply. You really have to be careful and well-trained to design an experiment, interpret an experiment. These are that's where the facts are. But really, I think there is a lot of creativity in science, and in medicine, we get our ideas from our patients, really. I mean, if you you see a patient and you realize, I can imagine that's how it started with the Mediterranean diet. How can it be that 95-year-old is still so fit? And then you think about how did they eat? How did they move? And then you think about creating, first you look in large cohort studies and then you design your experiment and prove it. So now we actually proved in a large clinical trial that if you eat a Mediterranean diet, and I don't mean pizza, it's really lots of good vegetables, not a lot of red meat, a glass of red wine, and a lot of olive oil. If you do that, you have a preventive benefit that's proven for heart disease. So afterwards, you have the cardiologist on stage. He may be telling you more about that. And also, if you had a heart attack, we know that based on this data, we can reduce our mortality by 70% if we eat a Mediterranean diet. And this is this is then the evidence.
There is a problem with creativity in this point because, as we know, there's a lot of great minds. They were like alcoholic. They would have extremely pervert thoughts. They would eat very badly or use drugs. I mean, not to start the
I was just thinking when you told us how you live, and how these challenges that you finished an exhibition and you feel already the pressure. So I need to be creative again, and can I do that? And you will be this is the mindset of a healthy ager. And you would imagine, and I will try to have a look at the literature, that artists may have a really good chance to be healthy agers because of that. They have to stay with the flow, they have to see the world around them, and they have to be extremely creative in the present. And that's a lot of the mindset that we know is linked to healthy aging. But the thing is, there are also artist-related lifestyle habits that may counterbalance that.
Right. Well, some of them know this.
I think this is a beautiful moment to maybe open the questions to the floor if anyone wants to get into the mix before we make space for the next round of discutants. Saskia, maybe pick one of these.
Sorry to ask this simple question, but how does alcohol influence aging?
Very important for all this audience, by the way.
So actually, one class of alcohol, and there may be an additional benefit to red wine, is part of the Mediterranean diet and has been proven as a beneficial strategy in life. And it's also part of the so-called mind diet, which is a new form of diet that builds on a Mediterranean diet and reduces your risk of dementia. And this is where you add to the Mediterranean diet some superfoods such as nuts, berries, and beans, and it has maintained that one glass of wine. Now, we know when you are a woman, you need to be careful about eating a lot of fruits because there is so alcohol is reducing the absorption of folic acid. So if you compensate, and this is what you do in the Mediterranean diet, you eat a lot of fruit and vegetables, and you only then get the benefit by the one glass of wine. So with a lot of things in life, in moderation, and the one glass of wine, I think you should enjoy.
But just repeat, one glass. I should not gain demand here.
Thank you. My question is for Pedro and is about, your relationship with your parents now that, how are those conversations with them now?
Amazing.
And
no, it's a true. Sorry. Please.
Yes, and how is it still influencing your practice? You're still now in the playing field of everything.
There is also once you make a family, your family gets a little bit obsolete because you have. But I still have a lot of contact to my parents, and an interesting thing is that I now realize that they are going to die. Because they're getting with my mom, I fall yesterday, I don't know. So I still have very good conversations with them, and they still give me a lot of knowledge. But I have a very lucky situation where my new family is a very rich pool of knowledge, so I learn a lot there as well. So, but still, it's very nice to talk. This is the thing. It's the best thing is to talk to older people, because they're gonna be 20 years ago, and then you think, what is 20 years ago? I lived 27, 27. So it's like it gives you a brighter.
I completely agree. When nowadays in medicine, you don't have time anymore, but you have to take your time in aging medicine. And that's why this also is such a nice field. And I always teach our assistant physicians, ask what people did in their life, and you will get the most amazing stories. So recently, we had this 95-year-old patient who coordinated the press communication of Karl Lagerfeld, for example. And I got to know how Karl Lagerfeld was as a young man and how he developed. And amazing. And, stories like that every day if you ask. Wow.
No, but right now I'm not even that old, and I talk to someone who is 20, and then we were talking, I was like, oh, you have to listen to their album. And then she goes oh, we just listen to tracks. I was like, wow, okay, you just listen to tracks. I'm so sorry. So
there was one more question. This went already. Right. Here you go.
I just have a question in terms of, have you discovered how routine has an impact on health?
So that goes a little bit back to sort of that border of turning 50. And if you start earlier, the better. So health and maintaining your health is work. And it's not only doing one thing right, it's usually that it's a whole program. It's being active, living not a sedentary lifestyle. It's trying to eat healthy, but also being among friends, having social contacts, and being, aware that maybe you have a family history, that you should have a focus on this and that. But it's really the routine of taking care of that health is very beneficial. But then there is also a routine that may be harmful, and that's what we see with aging. People become less flexible. So when I have patients on my ward, I pick dates for them. We do lunch dates. And it's very interesting. People who are willing, as a patient in the hospital, to have lunch with another patient, they have such, they have a profile to get back better, quicker. So when we get older, keeping that flexibility and accepting new things and being part of the flow is then work. There is some routine that's good, and there are moments where you should be starting new things and be a little wild and not having too much of a routine.
I have to think about a Brazilian writer. He got someone interviews him. He was a well-known writer, and then someone tells like, "So what is your advice for younger writers?" And he says, "Get old."
I love it.
Get old.
But there's one last question. Sorry, there's.
Yes. I have a very quick one for Professor Heike. Is there any research as well in how much joy influences as well aging versus physical activity and diet?
So, what's really impressive is that often it's you have to do several things. So if you are only joyful, it will not be enough. And sitting on the sofa, I'm sorry to tell you that, but the Harvard Medical School, actually in their large cohort studies, they found a series of mindset variables that contributes to healthy aging, and one of them is being grateful, being happy where you are now, seeing the world around you, and there is also some to spirituality, thinking about what's the greater meaning of all that. So this really that set of variables was predictive of being a healthy ager. But the ideal thing is to combine that with some exercise, some healthy diet. I think then you're very successful.
And I think we have to thank you very much. And I'm sure we are all around. So if there's any question that we couldn't take now, we will be in the audience. And we now just saying thank you, Pedro. Thank you, Heike. It was a pleasure. And please come back for the next talk.
Yes, thank you very much for this very, very open and nice talk to all three of you. Thank you.